So it is about raising. I mean, is it about raising money for a cause, or is it about raising money for you?
Well, I don't separate myself from what I'm doing, so I can't really answer that question. I mean, for me, what, am I going to buy a yacht? No. You know, like, I'm not a luxury kind of guy. I'm not looking to live the high life. I'm 55 years old, for God's sake. What would I do with that?
When you talk, say, about domestic violence, in the end, if men are pushed too far by a too aggressive of feminism, there will be a backlash, and that there is, there's a sort of undercurrent of violence, be it verbal.
Oh, that's a warning, that's a warning, not a commentary on the utility of that.
It's a warning that kind of suggests that there may be sort of fault in those who push progressivism too far. They will get a backlash. Some people, of course, see that as a bit of a permissive environment for bad behaviour.
Well, people tend to confuse describing the likelihood of something with supporting the fact that it exists. And I'm describing the likelihood of something, not supporting the fact that it exists. If you push too far on the left, you're going to get a backlash on the right. That's how things work. And this is just a derivation of that as far as I'm concerned.
How does that work in the context of domestic violence?
Oh, I don't think it's applicable in the context of domestic violence at all. I think those things are completely separate issues.
I mean, you were mentioning to me just as we were chatting.
And I was speaking only politically with regards to the backlash. That was a comment on political backlash. It had nothing to do with domestic violence. That's a whole different issue.
But violence often pops up in your work as something you think drives things. I think you've said in relations between men are regulated by a background threat of force, and in a sense that's why men have difficulty with women. Is it really so?
No, that's why men have difficulty with women who are completely out of control. But
who should control women?
Well, other women themselves, men, society, just like everyone is controlled. I mean, you're controlled by society, I'm controlled by society, and thank God for that. I mean,
funny. I mean, you described yourself as a liberal earlier, and I think a liberal doesn't think that a society controls women or men.
Well, let's say regulates. I'm a psychologist as well.
But what is an out-of-control woman? What is this creature? How do we know when we met one?
Well, I'm sure that you've met women in your life that acted towards you in a bullying and detestable manner. It's very difficult for women to cope with that because they don't have any real recourse. And female bullying can be unbelievably vicious. And usually it takes the shape of reputation destruction, innuendo, and gossip. It's well documented. It's very difficult to defend. Men do it too, but men no. But
disproportionately women, in your view, or not? Sorry.
Yes, disproportionately women. That's what the data indicate. I mean,
where is the data on innuendo and gossip?
Well, it's among antisocial behavior among adolescents. It's a well-documented field. So, because people look at aggressive and antisocial behavior in women and in men. And in women, it tends to take the expression of innuendo, gossip, and reputation destruction. And in men, it tends to take the form of outright physical aggression. There's a whole literature on that. It's not a surprise to anyone. This has been known for 30 years. I mean, the rates of antisocial...
I think the idea of the female gossip probably predates 30 years.
Well, it does.
By a long time, but that doesn't make it gospel,
but
really,
people
does it?
No, it doesn't. But people have looked at how women express... Look, women have to express aggression somehow unless you're willing to say that they're not aggressive. They tend not to do it physically, not to the degree men do, so they use other channels. And what other channels are there other than physical aggression if you're going to be aggressive? Well, you go after people verbally. You go after them with innuendo and gossip and reputation destruction. And that's how it works.
And just to be clear, that you think that's predominantly a female modus operandi?
It isn't that I think that.
Well,
it's that the clinical literature indicates that. It isn't that I think it.
Well, I'm not interviewing the clinical literature. I'm interviewing you. What do you think?
Well, I'm a psychologist and a scientist, and I tend to base my opinions on what I've read in the broad, relevant clinical literature. I'm not making this stuff up. I studied antisocial behavior for like 15 years. I'm actually quite an expert on it. And so we know that men are more likely to... Look at it this way. All right. Women are much more likely to try to commit suicide. And men are much more likely to kill themselves. And the reason for that is that men use lethal force and women don't. Now that's a big difference. Okay, so then you say, well, women manifest aggression towards themselves and to others, but they don't use lethal force. They don't use physical force the same way men do. So they have to do it some other way.
Why do they have to do something some other way?
Because people are aggressive.
You rightly picked up on the disruptive effect of social media, but also the technological shifts in media and mass media consumption. my argument was that this might be, leading to a polarisation, that people like you who are immensely successful within this milieu, but there is that, that point that you become part of the problem, that you've put your finger on yourself. You want people to get along together. You want men and women to sort of trade off. We don't agree entirely where these trade-offs are, but, we're here and arguing about it. And yet, at the same time, you succeed most when you say something very provocative that goes viral. You think you're sort of trapped in a paradox.
I don't think that's when I succeed most. So, for example, one of the incidents that propelled me to success, let's say, in terms of public recognition in the UK was my interview with Cathy Newman. And the reason that propelled me to success wasn't because I said something provocative, but because I refused under substantial duress to say anything provocative. And so part of the reason that I've become popular to the degree that I have been is that I'm actually very good at keeping my temper under situations where there's substantial reason not to, let's say. And I would also say that the good that I've done with regards to my online lectures far outweighs whatever harm might be done by the fact that people are cutting them and making provocative titles out of them and construing this as some sort of fundamental political war.
But it's not just other people, is it? If you look at something like the model that you partly use to promote your work is the crowdfunding site. So the more you incite a reaction, the more loyal your Patreon site, the more loyal the subscribers become, the more money is raised for causes that you want to promote.
No, that isn't how it works. The reason that, first of all, I give away all my content online for free. So the people who subscribe to Patreon are subscribing to nothing. They're supporting me, and they're not supporting me because of my political stance primarily. They're supporting me because they've watched my videos and they've been helped by them as individuals, and they're hoping that can happen to a lot of other people.
But if you want to give, excuse me.
Yeah.
If you see it as self-help and you want to give it away for nothing, then why bring money into the equation at all? And why have this sort of high-octane sort of crowdsourcing? Does rely on people coming to you wanting to pledge their money. Why put money into it at all? Isn't this an area where the market might be better left out?
I am an evil capitalist after all, and I don't really make any apologies for that.
Why do you want to monetize?
Well, because I can do useful things with money, and partly because I'm curious, partly because I need to live, partly because my job was at risk for a long while and that's not going to happen to me again, partly because I had to give up my clinical practice because of other considerations, partly because I have a family, partly because I want to build an online university.
Is it about raising money for a cause, or is it about raising money for you?
Well, I don't separate myself from what I'm doing, so I can't really answer that question. I mean, for me, what, am I going to buy a yacht? No. I'm not a luxury kind of guy. I'm not looking to live the high life. I'm 55 years old, for God's sake. What would I do with that? I have lots of things that I would do with some money. One of the things I want to do is build an online university, but it's not the only thing I want to do. And so I would put the money to good use, I suspect, or at least to reasonable use. And the reason that people are providing me with this money, which they don't have to do, is because they hope that I'll continue to do what I'm doing. And that is exactly the reason they're providing it with me. And my leftist critics have been saying for consistently, it's actually quite comical. Well, look at all the money that Dr. Peterson is generating with his Patreon account. It's like, well, I'm not selling anything. All the stuff I do online is free. It's not even advertising supported. So if people want to support me on Patreon because they think that what I'm doing is helpful, then more power to them as far as I'm concerned.
Do you feel that your kind of hearing works better in one direction than the other?
No, I don't think so. I mean, this week, for example, I was accused by a Jewish newspaper of harboring sympathies, which was rather miserable. But at the same time, an alt-right article came out today telling me that I was a stooge and a shill for the Jews. So, they figure I'm pretty much in the middle if I can attract that sort of criticism on both sides. And with regards to the right-wing issue, the right wing does not pose a threat to the integrity of universities in North America and Europe, but the left wing certainly does, and that's well documented, and not by me. There are no conservatives in universities, in the social sciences and the humanities. They don't exist, and that's not a good thing. And the radical left in universities absolutely exists and has utterly threatened the integrity of those institutions. And so to the degree that I've concentrated on the radical left, it's because the radical left has usurped the universities.